Bill Choate. I work with Tennessee Baptist Collegiate Ministry across the state of Tennessee. I want to share today with you about the concept of joy and what Christian believers find in joy. I got my AAA Living magazine the other day and was pretty excited. On second page, you can see the guys who change your tires and jump off your dead battery are going to tell you also about joy on page 19. How about that? They're going to talk to us about 4 seasons in Alaska, going for all 4 seasons in Alaska. And I love Alaska. It gives me a lot of happiness and joy. And getting back to nature, which is might include a trip to the Grand Canyon. Right there it is, AAA Living. You can find out about joy. I want to talk to you about joy today. There are a couple of things to think about. One is about the idea of happiness. Happiness is not the same thing as joy. Happiness is a temporary emotion. Studies have found that acquiring money and education and a big house and a great car are not going to affect your happiness levels long term. Researchers have studied people who win the lottery. Those who have won are no happier than those who have not. There's a thing called hedonistic adaptation that psychologists talk about. And within that research, there's a suggestion that everyone has a baseline of happiness, and things that are really great that come in your life may raise you a little above your baseline, but eventually you'll drop back down to this baseline. Happiness is a temporary emotion, and it's heavily influenced by the externals. Joy is a different thing, however. Joy is a deeper, more profound state of being. It's less influenced by the daily events of life. Joy is influenced by our connection to others. It's influenced by our connection to nature, by appreciating the good and the beautiful, and it's influenced by our faith. Sometimes life is hard. There's career setbacks, illness, broken relationships, death of a loved one. This is the reality of life, of every life. Some individuals discover and develop a level of contentment for the moment despite life's challenges, and that is joy. Joy is an internal, persistent condition of the heart. Now, when I talk about contentment, that's a closely related concept to joy, but don't confuse contentment with the concept of settling. Contentment means you can be okay with life, whatever comes, and that's a place you want to be. Joy is a practice. It's a discipline. In the New Testament, Paul writes his words. He says, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is anything excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. You want to learn to live with joy? Develop disciplines about your thought habits. Some people who know about joy make some basic recommendations, some disciplines that make joy more likely in your life. Some of them, they seem kind of silly and petty, but they're real and they're powerful. Smile. I'm not really good at smiling. I have to work at it. Consciously deciding to have a good day induces endorphins and other helpful chemicals in your brain. Making this a habit can bring on temporary happiness, but however, practicing through a lifetime on a daily basis will increase that baseline happiness level and bring you closer to a life of joy. Say thank you. Practice gratitude for what you have, for what you're able to do, and practicing gratitude will shape your spirit. Practicing gratitude for your health, for your employment, for family, for friends, for a home, that brings contentment and moves you closer to joy. Have positive thinking, not empty thoughts, but move your thinking toward happiness and ultimately toward joy. Regardless of the problem, the situation, or the circumstance, people can frequently choose whether they want to respond with joy or with negativity. The key is to practice this technique and make it a daily goal. Practice recognizing the simplest delights in life. Live in the moment. It sounds like a cheesy bumper sticker, but being aware of here and now, rather than worrying about tomorrow or fretting over the past, that's a practice of joyful people. And then give yourself away. Serving others increases your chances of developing joy. Moving from self-absorption toward a life of service brings joy. The Bible points Christian believers toward an expectation of joy. Expect joy in Christ. Psalms 5 says, there is joy for all who take refuge in the Lord. what is this joy? Just expected. Writing about church members who had acted generously, Paul in 2 Corinthians wrote, in the midst of very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. Even though they were poor, Jesus' followers knew joy. Paul showed that pain and joy can coexist. He says, as I remember your tears, I long to see you, that I may be filled with joy. James tells us this thing that doesn't even seem to fit together. He says, count it all joy, brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds. There's joy. That's not happiness. That's joy. It persists even through the trials of life. The New Testament book of Acts is all about how God's Spirit brought the birth of the early church. And throughout the book, an expression of joy was often evidence that God's Spirit was at work. Paul said, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing. Galatians gives a list of the fruits of the Spirit. How do you know there's Spirit of God in you? Well, there's fruit. And one of those fruits is joy. This joy doesn't depart when we shed tears. Jesus lived those 33 years on this life, on this world, and then he went on to be crucified on the cross and to rise again. But just before he left his disciples, he said some really important words to them, and some of those words are about joy. Here's some things he said in John 15. He wrote, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. In the next chapter, he says, you're going to have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. Joy is something people can't take away. Happiness is fleeting. It's temporary. It's an emotional response to external stimuli generally. But joy is something that's going to stick with you. AAA, I'm going to read it. I love a great trip. It makes me happy. And in all of that, I find some joy, but it's the joy I bring to it. My great pursuit in life is joy that persists whether I'm on that trip or at home on my porch. If you want to know more about the possibility of knowing joy in your own life, contact us. We want to talk with you. We want you to know joy, the joy we know in Christ. Give us a call.